remember, I'll say, hi, how are you? And all that. And then introduce yourselves with a, you know.
Got to speak long enough to take it off of Jason so that I get a look in.
Well, no, you can say hello first.
It does, and then you still jump in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Talking About Who. And this week we are going to be looking at the entirety of Paul McGann's Doctor on television. Not his audios, we've not got all week. Joining me, I'm Paul, or Peeble, or whatever you want to call me. Joining me this week, as per usual, we have got...
Hi, my name's James. Hello, everyone.
And hi, my name's Jason.
Hello, guys. I always forget to say, like this, click, subscribe, put your thoughts below. I do read them. I genuinely do. So we're kicking off this week with Doctor Who and the television movie, as it might be called if it were a Target book, or Doctor Who and the Enemy Within, if you really want to give it a title. So who wants to kick us off on this one?
I'll go on then. I will start with the TV movie. And I just want to say a disclaimer at the top. This is some sort of hard love, this is really, because I've grown to love this film. However, there have been times when I didn't love it so much. So let me start with the sort of the things that I find slightly frustrating about this film. It's a bit, you know, like Austin Powers, where they try and show that they're in London because they've got a red phone box every so often in the Sahara Desert, and it's like trying to be British. I think for me, this film is along those lines. It is everything that Doctor Who should be, and we'll probably go through all of those elements, but it's done in an American way, and so it doesn't, for me, sit entirely perfectly. It's like they've gone into sort of like Doctor Who history and gone, these are all the things we want in the film, and thrown it at the film. And it doesn't necessarily always work. So that to me, I find a little bit off-putting, if that makes sense.
I guess I think there's quite a sense of that early in the film, especially. I think you have that sort of bit where Sylvester's like, I'm going to have a jelly babies
yeah.
I'm going to have a sonic screwdriver. This is something he used to have. And I think you get a lot of that quite early in it. And I mean, obviously the very start is like, here are the Daleks who we can't afford to show, but they can have the voice. They were also in it. And here's the Master who was also in it. And I'm from Gallifrey, which was also in it. And I'm a Time Lord, which is another thing you need to know. And it's kind of like, this is 5-10 minutes of how many kind of cultural or sort of iconic Doctor Who things do we need to get the viewer to know? Which I suppose if you look at sort of other rebooty ones, I guess Spearhead or Rose, neither of them sort of start with this kind of, right, here's continuity that you will probably need to know, rather than sort of weaving it. It does feel a bit thrown.
It does, and I think it relies on you being a fan. And if they were looking to attract a new audience to this, I don't think that they're going to do that by the sort of whistle-stop encyclopedic, let's get as many Doctor Who references in as we can in 10 minutes. Because I think that's going to alienate potentially a new viewer. If this had turned into a series, I think you know, you'd have lost some of your audience just in that first 10 minutes.
I think it's brilliant that McCoy came back for the regeneration, and I, fair play to him for doing that. And like you say, all of those references are all very, very quick in the first sort of, he sat there reading the Time Machine as well, and it's like they've gone to a British person and gone, what do you think the first 10 minutes should look like if you're a Doctor Who fan? And bearing in mind that at the time, Doctor Who had come off the screens, there was a real desire to have it back. And then they sort of brought this movie out. And I remember personally at the time, I was so excited about it. And I really wanted this to be a platform for a new series. And I remember coming away from it going, oh, I'm not sure. And it's long since I was watching Queer as Folk the other day, and there's that line in there where he's naming all the Doctor Who's, and then he says Paul McGann doesn't count. And for a while it felt like that. For a while it was like the TV movie was kind of like the thing you don't talk about, like the hashtag spoiler, the Doctor's half human. It's that kind of like, we're not going to talk about that ever again. We're going to put it over here. But obviously since then, I think it's had a bit of a renaissance and people look at it a lot more fondly. And Paul McGann is seen as the Doctor we never really had. But at the time, it was kind of like, what have they done? This was our one chance to get Doctor Who back. And what did they give us?
But it's the danger of having a fan involved in behind the scenes, if you like, because, it's quite well documented that Mr. Seagal was taking these was taking the movie around or trying to get the series remade. Big fan, and always the pitches were around the history of Doctor Who, and the whole thing. It just portrays itself right in that first 10 minutes. And I think again, then you're stymieing yourself. So the characterization of the Doctor and companions and things like that, you're not able to start taking them in a direction that's slightly different, let's say, for example.
I think you're being a bit negative, you old Marys here. I think
I did say it was tough love. I will get to bits I love.
I think I agree. I mean, for me, when I sort of first watched this, I'd have been 13. Massively excited about it because it was a big new thing, and there was such a buzz about it. I mean, that year I had a Doctor Who birthday cake that year because it was big enough that people were. June, it hadn't been forgotten, you see. It still got a birthday cake and the magazine holiday special and stuff. It was big thing. It was like, this is it, Doctor Who's back. And not to underplay, it was a hit over here. It was a big hit when it came out over here. And all the excitement of the different VHSs, and I got mine with postcards from Woolworths, or you could have a glow in the dark at Smith's, and I don't know what the other iterations were, but I mean, it was a big, exciting buzz.
Yeah.
And it was a thrill because I think there was the worry as a fan that they would ignore Sylvester. I mean, I know people were very much kind of, where's Sophie? And I think Sylvester being in it was a kind of like, oh, thank goodness they're going to have Sylvester and we'll get Regeneration. I think my problem with the opening and Sylvester and that sort of part of it is that the way they do the Regeneration isn't, I mean, it's 25 years ago, so there's a lot of time to think about how they should have done it, because the hindsight is great. But to me, I think actually you could have had a sort of a spearhead from a space eek where Sylvester had landed, he was failing, and he says to either of the companions from this one, I'm a Time Lord, I'm going to change. And then he could have changed. I think it's sort of, there's that strange sort of thing of him going to the hospital and basically Grace kills him off, doesn't she? She's the first assistant to do for the Doctor. It sort of doesn't need that kind of, it's the laden of the continuity, because equally you could have the Master in it without explaining at the very start that we are best friends or we're from the same planet. You can give that information as it goes. And to me, sort of watching it the other day, I thought actually the thing with this is it shifts the gear once you've dealt with Sylvester going. And that's not to say I didn't want Sylvester in it. And I think he's great. And it's actually a really well-mannered performance and fantastic costume, everything. But the movie sort of shifts the gear and starts properly once he's regenerated and pulls into it. It almost feels like that 20-odd minutes of Sylvester at the start should have been a little shorter and things could have got going quicker.
It's an unfortunate way for him to go, like you say. He walks straight out the TARDIS into a hail of bullets, survives that, and then gets killed off while they're trying to, check his heart and accidentally kill him. And then you have the bizarre scene where he's gurning away on the slab, the regeneration scene. I mean, the regeneration in itself is okay, but you've got him sort of changing his face, which is, I find, a little bit odd. But I was a bit cruel on it to begin with because I wanted to get all the stuff that I find irritating about it out of the way. Because there's lots I do like about it, and over the years I've become sort of more and more in favour of things. And the whole scene where he's watching the hospital janitor's watching Frankenstein, is watching the horror film, and then the doctor comes back to life, and they say, I love that kind of thing. I find is quite nice. It's nice sort of juxtaposition with that. The scene where he's walking around the hospital with just a bed sheet around him and sees his face in the mirror and it's all cracked, and he says, who am I? Things like that. I love some of those things. I really do. I just think it's unfortunate that some of that Doctor Who history, whatever you want to call it, at the beginning kind of bogs it down. Yeah. And like you say, Sylvester's costume, brilliant. The new look TARDIS, it was like, wow.
The new look TARDIS set. I mean, that is for me one of the best sets of the TARDIS. It's gorgeous. It's got so much detail. Lots of nice little touches in there. And we get the expanded views of the TARDIS with the cloister room and various other bits. They did spend the money, and they spent the money in some of the right places, getting some of the set pieces right.
Jeffrey is an incredible director. It's a shame he's not actually been back for the new series because he's still very much active. So there's lots of very beautiful shots, and it goes at a cracking pace. I mean, interestingly, sort of talking about Sylvester getting shot in it, because that on the DVD is different cut to the TV version, right? Because there's an edit, isn't there?
They cut that out. There's a couple of scenes. The scene in the hospital, the scene on the surgery table as well. I think
he has two moans, doesn't he? He has a post-death moan, which I think was too bad for the audiences. I think. So it is quite violent in part, and also the master breaking his wife's neck. That's quite a gruesome part of it. I mean, one of the stand-up, but I mean, we'll come to sort of Paul, I guess, in a moment. Yiji's great. I think Yiji's got a sort of he's like new style Matthew Waters. There's a sort of Adric-y kind of vibe there, isn't he? He's the sort of artful dodger sort of kind of and hooks up with the bad guy without really quite realizing he's hooked up with the bad guy kind of setup. But Daphne is incredible. I think full kudos to her for Grace, because actually it'd be very easy to do that as quite a flat part, and she's got a lot of spark and a lot of comedy, and I think there's a lot of very subtle comedy in her performance, and he's like half human on Mother Sunshine. It's lovely. There are just lots of little light touches peppered throughout it, and I every time I watch it, I just see another part that I've not realised before.
Even the first shot of her where she's at the opera, and they say, "Who's on tonight?" and they go, "Oh, Amazing Grace," and then you cut to her, with single tear coming down her cheek, and the characterization is brilliant. Just from that first moment, and then she's walking through the hospital in the whole gown and everything. You're absolutely right. She is, an amazing companion. It's a really well-rounded part, and she delivers on that absolutely.
And the first person to swear in Doctor Who, isn't she? She said, "I'm not a child anymore. I don't believe that crap." Am I making that up?
No.
Put it below if I made that up. I'm sure she's the first swearer.
Mm.
And obviously, I mean, the big kickoff, I suppose, at the time amongst a lot of fans was the fact that they have a snog, isn't it? Nowadays, we're kind of used to that, aren't we? I mean, he's knocked off a lot of assistants since, but then it was quite a new thing, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. It was. I remember actually being quite shocked by it. And it's it's now, as you said, now so commonplace for us. And it was such an alien concept that the Doctor would be in any way romantic towards a companion.
I guess it's that thing that I suppose successively you try new things and you do new things, and I think the sort of avuncular thing would have been slightly strange. I mean, it's not like it's not like they're hooking up, is it? He's in a moment of excitement and elation, and it happens, doesn't it? But yeah, I can remember people being outraged. I remember John Perger going on about saying, "Oh, I never used to get to do that with my assistants." I don't know whether he wanted to spice up the time monster in some way. So Paul, do we think Paul was? I mean, he doesn't get a lot. I mean, he gets an hour, doesn't he, to make his mark on the show? And do you think he by the end of it, you're like, that is the Eighth Doctor, or is it like, oh, it's a start?
No, I wanted more. So woefully underused, and such a missed opportunity for me. Paul's a brilliant actor, and I think he brought a great energy to the role of the Doctor in the movie, and he carries it. He's the lead, he's got to carry it, but he does carry it, and he carries it really well, and he's got that sort of edge of zaniness around him. He's got that sort of manic energy. He's channeling a number of the Doctors in his performance, and it is actually, he's one of the mesmerizing things. There's some things I don't like about this, but he is mesmerizing to watch, and I just wish that we'd had an awful lot more screen time with Paul as the Doctor.
I think, you have to also give him credit for the fact that he didn't walk away from it after this one movie. It would have been very easy just to do the one movie, consider that it didn't pick up a series and go, oh, well, I've done it now, and just, walk off into the sunset. He stayed with the franchise all this time. He's still knocking out big finishes, like, they're going out of fashion. He's been there all that time, and don't get me wrong, because I love it, because I've just immersed myself in the Time Lord Victorious, and I actually enjoy listening to Paul McGann on the audio stories, because he's still got that manic energy. He still sounds like he's having fun. It almost is as if he's just literally left the Doctor Who movie and gone straight into that audio, because of the level of energy and pizzazz he gives it. So I have to say, he's the one Doctor that I always wanted more of. Outside of the TV movie. Even though for a while I wasn't that fond of the TV movie, I was fond of that Doctor, and I wanted more of that Doctor.
It's always hard for an actor when they step into the role, because their first stories, or the initial stories, so let's take Spearhead, let's take Robot, they're never seen as true and ultimate classics, because they always carry the baggage of being the first story of the new Doctor. So you're getting used to the new character, and you're adapting to that more so than potentially concentrating on the story. And he had that as a handicap to a degree through the film, but thankfully, I don't think it weighs the film down. We're not trying to get used to his characterization of the Doctor, because we're rattling along with the pace of the film. We've had sort of the first 10, 15 minutes, or however many minutes of, Sylvester there, and now we've got a new Doctor. And in some respects, I know we've talked about this already, but having Sylvester there probably grounds the film for you straight off, and then it takes off and gathers a new energy. And then you can travel with the energy, with the Doctor, and actually get to know him as part of the character that he's developing in the film.
I think I see where you've gone with that. I mean, by the end, he is there, isn't he? There isn't any kind of six story arc where it's like, we'll see the true nature of him, by the end of the season. I think he's straight into it, and I mean, by the end, he's. I mean, I'm not sure how the end of the day is saved. I mean, what is a temporal orbit? I'm trying to convince Daphne that needs to be a T-shirt. What's a temporal orbit? What is it?
There could be a series here about a temporal orbit. You never know.
What is it? I mean, all it is an excuse to bring everyone back at the end. But I mean, the other big name that I suppose we should talk about while we're on the roll here is it's Gordon Tipple. No, it's Eric Roberts. Straight in it as the master. What about Eric Roberts as the master? Jason's taking your head. I think you'd be all over this.
I'm going to have to take my head out of my hands, because this is one of the weaker points of the movie for me. Eric
Really?
Roberts never quite convinces me that he's the master. I don't think he carries it off as well as I would have liked him to have.
Did you watch the same movie?
I watched it. I can trust you. I've watched it. So I did watch the same movie. And unfortunately for me, look, it's no good coming on here and just saying what people want to hear. I'm coming on here and I'm saying how I feel about it. And in this instance, he doesn't deliver as the master for me.
I love the moment he appears on the top of the stairs with all the Time Lord robes, and he's just like, it's so camp, it's brilliant. And so Paul McGann goes, "Oh, time enough to change then," sort of like, he's like,
it is the line, is it? I always dress for the occasion. It's the thing. I mean, the master sort of progressively, I think, old master does get a little bit sort of more campy with it. I mean, by the time it gets to Anthony Ainley, I mean, end story aside, it's quite, and I think it's quite interesting actually with the master in the film, because there's a different shit. I mean, Eric, you can like it or hate the performance, but he gives a different performance from Bruce to the master, and the different stages of the master. So there's sort of early bits where he's sort of doing his Terminator thing and peeling off his finger and all that sort of Kensington gore. And then he's sort of just sort of the shadowy, I'm doing this Arnie style. And then all of a sudden he's like, do you know what? I've won now. So let's go for it, guys. And it's kind of like big.
A big Saturday night entertainment on the BBC series.
But it is the right side of big, I think. I mean, we sort of discussed this in a few other sort of videos, I think, where pitching is quite something. And I think if he had pitched the end of the film master at the start of the film, you'd be like, crikey, this is a bit much. But I mean, at the end when they got the wind machines going and the lights going and it's all kind of like, this is it now, throwing people around, and he's gone for the full villain part then. And I think it's the right size with it, in my opinion.
And I think he's still just as evil towards the end, because, he breaks his neck and then he throws Grace off the platform and kills her as well. There's, there is that pure evilness about him. But you're right, he is more high camp towards the end than at the beginning, where he's sort of plotting to find the doctor and everything. And there's some quite funny exchanges as well when they're in the ambulance. And Grace says, "Oh, he calls himself the Doctor," and he's like, "Well, there's a name for someone like that." And it's that whole sort of joking around. But he gets progressively more supervillain towards the end.
That's the horrible bit. I mean, again, sometimes these things don't. I mean, if you sit and think about it, does it make that much sense that he goes from being dead to being a sort of green snake to being a half snake, half man that spits venom at people? And because he spits the venom, great, and he sort of basically slimes all the guys, doesn't he, at the party? And I don't know. I mean, there's the master as a character. I mean, especially even like when you've got Deadly Assassin and stuff, there's always that sort of element of, I'm not sure how we've got to this point with him or how he escaped from the last thing or whatever, but I think he gives a compelling, and again, this is his only shot at it. I mean, it's not like there's multiple. He doesn't have a I'm coming back every story this season moment. This is his one shot at it, and I maybe it's a bit Marmite for some people, but you either love his performance or you don't. Or I mean, I just worry that Jason's incensed that someone might be camper than him.
Well, maybe there is a little bit of that. I mean, I could get the Marmite out for Eric Roberts, but all I'm saying is that I just think that it just never quite convinced me. So I'm not saying I didn't like the performance, it just didn't convince me. But, if anyone wants to come and out-camp me, they're more than welcome, by the way.
Where's your collar? Are you going to change the collar later in the video? Is that?
Just for the scores, he's going to come out in the full dress.
Do you know, the terrible thing is, I can imagine that's true. We'll be down and back.
I'm saying nothing.
I think we've just. I mean, is there anything? I mean, Josie said you don't like it. particularly? Is there anything that you, I mean, we've sort of touched on Eric's points. Is there anything you particularly don't like about it, and we can tell you you're wrong?
I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with it. I think it's, you know, it's a made for TV movie. Unfortunately for me, at times it doesn't quite shake off that cheap I'm made for TV movie, but it's lifted by some very, very strong performances. And actually rewatching it was interesting because, again, as you know, I've said in a couple of other videos, there was a period in the sort of late run of the classic series where I fell out of love with Doctor Who a little bit. And there'd been enough time between the end of that series and the movie. And I came to it with fresh eyes, and I generally enjoyed the movie, and I generally enjoyed it when I rewatched it this time round. It's just, it lacks in a few bits, and a few bits are just off key. But I think it's kind of good.
What were your thoughts on the half-human thing? So that,
I mean, to me, I don't give a toffee. That doesn't make me upset on any level whatsoever. I mean, he must have come from somewhere.
Yeah. That was second on the list of things after the kiss. It was you've made him half-human now. It was like.
I mean, we live in a generation now where there are about 2,800,000 pre-Hartnell doctors. So I'm not entirely sure. I mean, if we're going to get incensed about anything, we're going to get incensed about that rather than half-human, surely. I
mean, also, the thing that people got really upset about is also then that kind of thing where actually there is a sort of inference that he might be joking because he's pickpocketing the guys. He's like, I'm half human on the other side. And is he joking? I mean, then you have all the weird...
The Eye of Harmony.
With the Eye of Harmony opening up for people that it likes or that are human, or... Because obviously the Gallifreyans would make technology based on only human being eyes. Opened by human eyes. I mean, the notion that the Eye of Harmony is now like a big sort of paddling pool inside the TARDIS is a strange thing that sort of, you know, it looks good. It doesn't make a lot of sense on that front, but
it was a plot tool, wasn't it? Really, just to carry things along.
Someone had the John Peel Gallifrey Chronicles book, and it sounded good in there. That we'll have that. That's going in.
And the cloister room set is a little bit like the old Select in The Rover's Return, where it used to grow and shrink dependent upon how many people they need to put in there.
I was about to say, there was never a studio that big at Granada. There was never a studio that big.
I just want to add a little factoid. As you know, I like these things. Eccleston and Capaldi were invited to audition for this movie. So we could have had one
of which part?
For the Doctor.
Why? They could have been cutting the fish at the start in the restaurant. We don't know.
Could have had Capaldi as the master.
Could have done.
He would have been the first one to swear in a Doctor Who movie.
How do you think we'd have received it had it moved into being a full series in the end? Because obviously there was some discussion at the time around it potentially becoming a series. Do you think that would have been a good thing for us, or were we better off waiting for 2005 and at that stage?
I don't know. I think strangely we were having this conversation on one of our other recordings about what would happen if Doctor Who sort of finished here. You'd probably find Netflix or another company would pick it up immediately, and it's that I think I could probably go along with. I think back then it may have seen it would have been a bit ahead of its time in the fact that another sort of country had come in and picked it up and started doing it. A lot of the American remakes were nowhere near as good as the British one. So I would have been quite nervous for them to say we're going to do it, like that. That being said, if you look at New Who, it's 45-minute episodes. It's very Americanized in the way that it's done. But I think it would have been back then a bit of a push. Could be wrong.
But they were also intending on remaking, weren't they? So the Gunfighters was one that they got earmarked. Good, Linda Barron back on the Joanna. Talons of Weng Chiang was another one. I thought we could have another bash at that. So it'd have been like a Murder, She Wrote, where they'd have just filmed it in Los Angeles and just put a few hansom cabs going by. Do you know what the thing? I think it's not unfair or xenophobic. Doctor Who is a very British thing, and it's one of the things that you can find a little bit of a struggle when you're watching. It's not a struggle to watch, but a struggle within it. That it's trying to be a glossy American telly movie, but also the sort of home-baked Doctor Who series from the BBC, and that kind of the two can sit together. I mean, they can. It's not saying you can't, but there is a sort of juggle you can feel that they're going, right, this is what the networks want, this is what they want to do, and they're like, oh, Doctor Who's kind of not like that, this is what it is, and you can sort of see that the two are swaying. And if it had gone to a full series, I mean, who knows, but I suspect it would have upped onto the slick kind of American, this is 26 episodes, and there's nothing wrong with that, but whether it would have been Doctor Who as we know it, I mean, we're incredibly lucky that Doctor Who as we know it came back with Russell and Julie and Phil, because they had an idea of what Doctor Who was and what made Doctor Who work and what they needed to do to make it modern and appeal to a new audience. And I suppose the failing with the TV movie is it's not quite hitting it for either. I mean, 25 years on, we could say we love it or we don't love it. But at the time, it didn't quite hit a target for everyone. It upset a lot of fans. Some fans loved it. It didn't do for the networks. It did for the BBC, but not enough for them to go with it on their own. And I guess that's sort of the legacy of the movie, if you like.
And do you think that the decision not to bring Paul back in 2005? I mean, I've interviewed Phil and asked him this very question, and I know his answer. But do we think that was, again, the right call to just cast somebody brand new to break off the shackles because of that very reason you just said?
I think the new series picks up elements of the film, and I think it picks up elements of Sylvester's last season as well, which we've talked about. And I think you're right. What they've done is they've taken the essence of what Doctor Who is and put it into a new style format. And I think we're more favourable to that than if they tried to just pick it straight up and just go, well, we're going to continue building on it. I think that element of having a full stop and then saying, okay, we're going to do it this way now, helped, but at the cost of Paul McGann not doing it, which is very good. That being said, I don't want anything to be taken away from Eccleston, because he relaunched the show and he redefined, that role. And I'm sure we will talk about that in a further
Hashtag
6-hour debate.
Future adventures. I mean, with Rose, the magic of Rose is that you discover the Doctor, the TARDIS, and everything through Rose's eyes. That is the brilliance of the narratives that's done, and that's when the narrative works well on the TV movies, when you're discovering the Eighth Doctor through Grace, when she starts talking to him, and then she realizes that he's not a nut job and that he's telling the truth, and that's when it works. And that's why, so we said at the start of it's a bit murky, because it's not fulfilling that narrative function. I mean, crikey, if I was an American viewer who had never watched Doctor Who before, I can't think that it would have carried me through from the offset. And that's just because it wouldn't have made an awful lot of sense or interest or whatever. Like, I don't get this. So am I meant to have watched the last 26 years of something that's not been syndicated entirely over here? I'll watch Roseanne, it's fine. I'm done with it.
But I think if they just started with Paul on the screen and none of that, then all the British fans would have gone, well, this isn't Doctor Who, and so I think it was an impossible, to please everyone's situation. But I for me, looking back on it now, it worked, but at the time it was still a bit odd.
I think I'm a little bit like James in that I if I'm reading this right, I loved it when it came out, and I was very excited by it, and I loved the whole thing. And for a period afterwards, when it was still sort of rejuvenated, and you were getting, there was a comic strip in the Radio Times, and the novels were relaunched, the VHSs were all giving you branding. It's like, this is it, it's coming back. and as the months sort of rolled on, it got to the point where like, it's not, is it? This is it. Now it's killed it for good. And I think the notion that it had killed it for good then gave it that thing of stop that, it ruined it. It did this, it did this, it did this. And for quite a while, you then had that thing of I don't want to watch the movie. It destroyed Doctor Who, and then time goes on, doesn't it? These things go in waves, don't they? And I think to watch it now, it's the 1996 Doctor Who. I mean, it's not particularly like. I mean, it is like old. It's like the new, but it's different from both, and it's its own little individual era in the middle of nowhere, and it's sort of curate because it didn't lead specifically.
But it's like a bridge though to the new series. There are elements in it that you could see when it came back, and you're right. It's not one. It's not the other. It's its own thing. But there is still bits for the hardcore fans and bits for the people that were looking for the future of Doctor Who. And I think in hindsight, that's why I like it more. And I am you read me exactly right. I loved it. It went down in my estimation for a long time because I was kind of like, where's the new series? But then over the time has been kind to it for me, and it's gone back up in my estimation, and it deserves to be there.
So, do we think we're heading towards scores on the doors to Doctor Who and the film? Or Der Film, as it's known affectionately in Germany. Let's go. Let's go to old Mr. Marmite, Jason. What score are you going to give Doctor Who and the television movie?
I do this all the time, but because I think James
is going to defer to me.
Passion. James has got such a passion for this that I really would like to see his score first.
Come on, Jason. You got two hands there to do your score. You don't need any more than that.
Okay,
unless your hand's busy, we don't want to know.
I'll go with my score. I've scored it because actually I preferred it originally, and actually on the rewatch, whilst it's very interesting, I think I'm somewhat spoilt now with the new series. So I must admit my rewatch. If I'd not done the rewatch, I think the score might have been slightly higher. Anyway, cutting a long story short, I've come up with a score, and the score is 6.
Hey, hang on, if that's cutting a long story short, I hate to see the long story.
6 for the TV movie.
6 for the TV movie. James, what are you going to give Doctor Who and the television movie?
I'm going to give it a nostalgia-loving 8.5.
8.5.
I really enjoyed watching it the other day, and it's not like I don't normally include it when I do like season watch along. So it's something I don't watch that often, and I really, really enjoyed it.
So, drum roll. It's interesting because I sort of in my head didn't think I would enjoy watching it again as much as I did when I watched it. But it's a big but. It's great and I love it. It's not an all-time classic, but it rattled along. I mean, I watch a lot of Hallmark afternoon murder movies. I mean, to me, this is bread and butter. I mean, come on. So anyway, I'm going to give Doctor Who and the television movie. I'm building my pipe more than Jason now. 7. A solid 7.
Do you know what? That's a solid score and a very fair score, I think, as well.
Which gives Doctor Who and the television movie 21.5.
A real favourite with you then, James?
Yes, I have to say it is. And I loved it when it first came out. Then it went down, and now I think it deserves its place in amongst the Doctor Who history, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but sticking with Mr. McGann and moving on a fair few years, it's Doctor Who and the Night of the Doctor. Oh. So, James, were you thrilled to see Mr. McGann back?
I was, yes, I know. Having for so long said this is the one, the Doctor that never was really, because he never got an opportunity to come back, and then suddenly they throw that surprise mini episode out there, and it is one of those things where you just like, if you were to give a Doctor Who fan a list of things that they wanted to see, it was the Regeneration of Paul McGann. You know, it was to have either Paul McGann back for a series or the regeneration of Paul McGann, and then suddenly, as part of the birthday celebrations, they had this mini episode come out. And I just remember that first line is like, she's saying, "Oh, I don't need a doctor." And you just hear his voice go, "I'm a doctor, but maybe not the one you're expecting." Because it wasn't, because it came out of nowhere. It was like suddenly there was we knew that Tennant was coming back for the episode, and there was going to be a few surprises. And then suddenly you had Paul McGann on there. And then not just Paul McGann in a mini episode, Paul McGann effectively regenerating into John Hurt at the end, into the War Doctor. So, I mean, ticks every box for me, I have to say. It's like, wow. Yeah. And just what I've been saying about Paul McGann, that 4.5 minutes, 5 minutes episode, he smashes it. And you still want him to be the Doctor. You still want to say, I want an episode of this. I want a 13 episode series where he suddenly pops up again, because it's just so good.
Yeah, I've got to agree with absolutely everything you said there. And it really did drive home quite how much we were robbed, I think, as fans, for not having a proper run of Paul in the lead role. It was a cracking piece of television, and you know what? It was a lovely surprise. It was a great little short story, but he was absolutely outstanding in it.
I think the big shame about the whole thing for me is that Steve Moffat has said, hasn't he, that he did proffer the option of having Paul McGann in Day of the Doctor, and they were like, no, we want a big name in this, because obviously Chris had decided it wasn't going to be for him. So then it was thought, well, we could get Paul and do it that way, and they said, no, we want a big name, and they sort of went for John Hurt. And for me personally, the whole War Doctor thing, I don't get it. I'm not a fan of it. John Hurt, incredible. I would take nothing away from him. Incredible actor. Obviously, it's stupid to say anything otherwise. He's an incredible actor, incredible performance in it. But the War Doctor thing for me was all a bit, I don't get this. I don't see the point of this. We could do this another way and not muddy the waters. But, that said, it's just that in my head, and even watching the Night of the Doctor episode, you can see that the Eighth Doctor's gone from being that optimistic sort of almost childlike wonder in the movie to a beaten sort of soldier. And he's like, oh, crikey, if he was the War Doctor in effect, that had travelled that and been broken by this sort of intense situation, then he regenerates into Chris Eccleston. That would just for me flow better, rather than this kind of let's make him a soldier and whatever all that was. But incredible, and also that thing that Paul straight into it. And I mean, it's a brief. The hour was short. This is shorter still, and he's on it. And he doesn't. It's not a case of it's a 5-minute thing for the anniversary, whatever. I'll phone this in. He's on that, and he's given it. And Claire Higgins as well. There's a lot of effort put into this. I mean, it's a shame we didn't get Julie Brown back. I mean, we've done it. Could have had Ohika.
I was watching the extras on the 50th box set, because I watched this and I was watching the 5 Doctors-ish the reboot thing, the Peter Davison one. And Paul McGann's in that, and there's a line where he's like on the phone to his agent going, "Oh, can I fit this in?" And the other doctors are all sat there going, "Who's he talking to?" like this, and and then you see him in this, and it's so brilliantly done. But I just fair play to him. Like I said, he came back. And I suspect if you said, "Oh, we want to do a Doctor crossover episode and we want you in it," he'd probably jump at the chance, because he just is that character. He's Doctor Who, and he just seems to be able to just step into it effortlessly, even though it's like 20 odd years later.
I don't know whether it's an accident, but Steve Moffat also does a script that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that you don't have to watch it 18 times to try and work out what the one before could have led to this and what. It's just straight in, isn't it? I mean, No?
I absolutely agree with you.
It's no press gang. But no, it is great, and it works, and you get that. And I think one of the important things, I think, as a fan, and you want to tick a lot of boxes as a fan, don't you? I mean, there's that gene inside everybody, and getting the regeneration with Paul, and getting the outro speech, and the sort of, there's nothing worse than that kind of Colin Baker thing of your last line as the Doctor is carrot juice, and you think, oh shit, if only it wasn't just carrot juice, and that takes that away from Paul, I think, and it's amazing that he does get this, and quite rightly, because it was the 50th anniversary, it was quite right to acknowledge, because I think it's easy to airbrush things out, and the movie that solidified that that's not something that's airbrushed, and that's something that's very relevant.
And I love the fact that he also mentions all of his companions from the Big Finish stories. So, you have this moment where he's, about to regenerate and change into the War Doctor. So he, and then he calls back all the companions that he's had in the, in the Big Finish stories, which I like. It brings things together.
What happens when they start knocking out box sets with different companions, though? Doesn't that ruin the future-proofing?
Timey-wimey.
Indeed.
When in doubt, timey-wimey. No, it's a good nod, because I mean, essentially, Big Finish joking aside, have given Paul McGann and the Eighth Doctor a massive lifespan, a bigger sort of flow and a bigger kick than you could have ever had elsewhere, really. I mean, even if he'd had a TV series, he wouldn't have had the level of sort of story and things that he's had through their releases.
And it was kind of a nice piece written in that we had the twist with the Sisterhood of Khan, and it was Khan that they crashed onto, and it was kind of nice that it sort of, again, lots of Time Lord mythology and whatever there. It was just a nice little extra in what was a packed 5 minutes.
Yeah. The reaction of the girl on the ship, when she realized he was a Time Lord, that's really powerful as well. When he was like, I'm trying to save you, and she was just like, I'd rather die, and take you with me, which is completely against the Doctor and how he would his normal behavior. So that's really powerful as well. Just demonstrates the time war, the impact in a very, very short space of time, whereas we've watched whole episodes and still not really understood the time war. So
I take this episode over quite a number of some of what we've seen, I think, in some of the new seasons.
It's great, and because Emma's really good. I mean, because she's sort of wasted in the one she's in, because she's in Wedding of River Song. Am I right on that? She's one of the eye patch folk. So I mean, great part for her, and again, it is, I think, traditionally in the story, if it was, she'd have gone, oh, thank you, Doctor, for rescuing me. Let's go and have 6 stories exploring time and space. And the fact that she's like, no, don't come near me. It is a powerful thing. And
yeah,
I mean, we could have had a lot longer watching that. The story could have been stretched out a lot more there, but it's nice that it exists.
Yes,
agreed.
So I think we've talked longer than it lasted, maybe longer than it took to make. Do we have some scores for the finale of the Eighth Doctor, Doctor Who and the Night of the Doctor? Let's go to James first, because then Jason will get upset about it.
Well, I am going to go for an absolute fanboy gushing 10 out of 10.
Stop the press. What?
I
What?
Genuinely, when I watch that episode, I get goosebumps, and I it doesn't need to exist. It's not part of anything else, but the fact that it does exist, and the fact that it gives you that closure on Paul McGann,
See, because he's not speaking, we can't tell that Jason's holding up a canvas of Annie Walker, can we? Say something, Mary.
It's an improvement.
I'm thinking about my score.
Oh, it's because I've gone first, isn't it?
It's still not cut back to him. Think longer.
I think I need to think about my score. That's what I need to do.
I don't think Annie Walker was ever that camp. Well, I'm yeah.
You're flabbergasted, aren't you?
That's my Yendrik Eurovision. And I can't hit that note. I haven't hit that note since I was 11. Go on then, Jason. Shock us with your score on the door.
Well, I'm going to shock you with my score on the door on this one because I appreciate that my score for the TV movie almost brought tears to your eyes there, because I think James particularly thought I was being very hard there with it. But I am going to absolutely 100% agree with James here, and I'm giving this a proper old 10 from Len. It's a 10 from me.
What's wrong with you two? Oh, well, that's lovely. I mean, maybe 90 minutes was too long for you two, and it should just all be 6 minutes. Oh, we're at peak Marmite here. It's a lovely little thing. It's a happy little thing. It's great to see him go, but you know, I'm going to give it a point per minute, and I'm giving it 6.
That's not the right score to be giving it.
I mean, this from the guy who massacred Kroll.
Yes.
I stand by my 4 points that I gave the Kroll, because my rationale and my thinking behind the reasons for those scores were perfectly legitimate and valid. And if you haven't seen it, it's in our season 16 talking about who.
I'll be sure to check that out. So in summary, I mean, normally I've got quite a few stories to get through here. Night of the Doctor therefore finishes, this is like 4 in a bed. 4 is finished with an average total. No, it finishes with 26 points, which means that we like it more than the actual movie that preceded it. I say we.
I stand by, I don't give 10s out very lightly, and I stand by my scores.
And I indeed stand by mine, because I never really give 10s out either.
And I stand by my 6 because that's it.
It's great that we don't all agree with each other in these, isn't it?
It is great to have our own individual opinions. Well, thank you very much, guys, for joining me to discuss Paul McGann's long tenure as the Doctor. I mean, it was realistically a long tenure. So if you have enjoyed this, or if you haven't, still click like and subscribe. Don't put horrible comments, though. Say nice things. So thank you very much. Thank you, James. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you soon.